Welcome to the Exploring Washington State podcast. Here's your host, Scott Cowan.
All right, we're back for our second episode with Wanz. We've had some technical difficulties, none of that you care about. But in our first episode, if you haven't listened to it, you need to go back and listen to it because we're all about those stats. Just kidding. So we talked about Lakes High School. We talked about Central Washington University. We talked about the Central Connection Band. We talked about Mount St. Helens. We talked about suspicions and impacts. Mm-hmm. But we left out something.
What?
We left out the Jeremiah was a bullfrog story.
Okay. Yeah. Well, imagine, if you will, third grade, they used to have what's called portables outside of the main school, and third grade, I was in a portable classroom with a teacher named Mrs. Eaton. And she was phenomenal. She was great. But the class itself was kind of horrible because I was a small and scrawny lad, very small, very scrawny, and I had a hair trigger temper. So it was really easy to get me going. And my mom's best friend's son loved to tease me, always got me going. I got in so much trouble because of that kid. So, springtime comes and we're looking forward to, the end of school. And I discovered that I actually could play kickball because I could kick the ball okay, but I could run really fast. So kids started to, there were more opportunities to play different things that I didn't have to engage with that guy, right? It was just trying to keep myself level in classrooms. And once again, it was found out that, I could sing and people liked that I could sing. And it came to be like the last week of school. And it was like, you should sing. You should be in the talent contest. You should be, the assembly on the last day of school, you should be in the talent contest. And so I said, okay. And I signed up for it. And then what I remember is the very last day of school, we had like about an hour's worth of class. And then everybody went in the auditorium and the performers were supposed to be in a different place, and I was in that different place, and like two or three people, or say the first graders went and the second graders went, and then I was a third grader, and when I went up there, it was like completely quiet. And in the Lake Louise Elementary School auditorium, and out of nowhere, I just started singing, Jeremiah was a bullfrog, was a good friend of mine. Never understood a single word he said, but I helped him drink his wine. And everybody, that song's called Joy to the World, actually, right? So it's like, every joy to the world. It was great. Got a big round of applause when I was done. And that one thing has followed me around for ever since. There are
a long time now.
Yeah, there's probably like 7 or 8 people that are in my Facebook group that went to Lake Louise that are still around, and they every single one of them remembers it. They don't forget it, and they remind me of it. So I figured I was like destined, and from that time on, it was like I heard it a lot. You're a really good singer. You should do that a lot more. You'll probably be famous. You're really, really good. You'll be famous, and I believed him. All through elementary school, all through junior high school, all through high school. College was a little bit more shaky, but by the time I got to Central, I knew that I liked to show off. And the one thing that I couldn't, I wasn't as fast anymore, but I knew that I could sing.
We didn't have intramural kickball at Central, did we?
Yeah, thank God. I don't think that would have worked very well. Not with that kind of wind. No way.
All right. So thank you for going backwards. Now we can go forwards.
Okay.
So when we left off last week, we were talking about impacts.
Yep.
OMAC.
Yep.
Your friend
The Chief. The Chief.
So what was next?
Well, Impacts was like it's like a bar band, and a bar band in the sense of they played covers that people liked, but people who were maybe in their 30s to 40s liked, right? And it was okay. I mean, it was okay. We started not getting booked as much because blues was starting to kick in. And so there were a couple of blues bands in town, and they were getting the work that we should get. And I started hanging out at this bar that was just outside of town in a big barn structure called
Quonset hut,
called the Ranch. And they had music out there, and I can't remember how I met Bob Wynn, but Bob Wynn was the owner, and he and I talked about music a lot. And we were both from Tacoma, so we had this, this connection and stuff. And he said, you should put together. Well, actually, Impacts actually played out there in front of a band from Tacoma, I think, or maybe it was one from Yakima. I can't remember. But after that, I do remember that we sat down and had a discussion at the Galaxy Room of the Highway Grill.
Oh my gosh.
That's right. Okay. And the Highway, that was his favorite spot. And the Highway Grill, now there's a Taco Time on it, or a Taco Bell. That's where you run for the border in Ellensburg. Mm-hmm. It used to be this great old school diner called the Highway Grill. And their bar was called the Galaxy Room, had no windows. And, it was like a weird, it was almost a black light, blue light that was in there all the time, but they had all this paraphernalia on the walls that had to do with stars and whatever. And, it was creepy, but it was really cool. Had its own personality. And I'm hearing from Bob, Mike, you should put together a band. I know this guy, and he knew the drummer from Impacts. And so we got together with Ken, and this one guy was Jay Stevens. And I can't remember how, it's weird how we all came together, but we all, and then Ken had a friend from high school who played guitar, and his name was Joe. And Joe and Ken and a couple of other friends of the band knew another guy named Tim and one more guy named Mike Stoll. And Tim could kind of play guitar, but he played keyboards. And Mike Stoll he could sing higher than I could. So he was like a lead singer kind of guy. And, he was kind of like Bono, but he just was like younger and skinnier. So anyway, so there's me, Ken Brooks, Joe Kingston, Tim Haley, Mike Stoll. And we decided on a name, Slow Children at Play. We wanted to call ourselves Free Beer, but yeah, that for some reason we bet against it. So Slow Children at Play was we learned some U2. The popular songs of the day was like U2, Billy Idol. Jay was really into Squeeze, and Joe.
You guys played In Excess.
Yeah, played In Excess.
And did you play Angel City in that? Did you do Marseille in that band?
Yeah, we did. No, we didn't do Marseille, but we did Longline, which to this day is like the stuff of legend.
Yes.
Like no one does Longline anymore, and I still remember it. But yeah, Blue Highway by Billy Idol. It's like we did the B-side hits that should have been hits that were never really hits.
But you knew them.
Yeah, people knew the songs, but everybody, every band was playing, White Wedding. Every band was playing Rebel Yell. Every band was playing. There was this new band out called The Romantics, and they had a song called What I Like About You, and that was everybody played that song. But it was really interesting. We did some Fix, and it was just this weird kind of thing that was fighting between like Americana, straight ahead rock, and the British invasion type stuff.
Right,
but anyway, we went over pretty well. And so Bob said that we needed to do this more often. And so that went from the end of 83 into the beginning of 84. And because I remember we had rehearsals in the ranch going into 84, and we would rehearse there, and it was cold. It was just like freezing. You could see your breath, and we're trying to practice. Jay reminds me of this all the damn time. I remember being in the ranch, and it was so cold, and the strings were cutting his fingers, and we had to quit because his hands got cut up. But we got pretty good and started writing some originals. And by the springtime, Mike got really sick, and it turned out he had lung cancer. And he ended up passing away. Tim turned into a giant asshole, kicked him out, and the band became Boys Will Be Boys, because we were always like screwing around. I mean, Jay and Ken and I got along famously. Joe had a girlfriend. Actually, he was married and then was getting divorced, and it was like getting kind of weird. It was just really weird, because his girlfriend, he and his wife Robin were both hairstylists, so they'd gone through school together, and had tried to make a go of it and stuff. And hanging out at the ranch, there was so much. I will call it weirdness, because there was alcohol and there were drugs involved, and we put alcohol and drugs and music into a business, you get drama.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It was drama. Every weekend there was some sort of drama. Oh God, this is about the time that Art came up and helped Bob run. Art was Bob's brother, and Art was like he's the guy who tries really hard to be intellectual, but really doesn't have the brains to be intellectual. He keeps trying to prove to you how smart he is. Mm-hmm. It was annoying. So he and I would always get into these jousts about public affairs and this, that, and the other. And it would always end badly for him, because I had a bad habit of insulting him, and him not realizing that I insulted him. But anyway, musically, it was great, because Boys Will Be Boys was a hit. And so when bands like the Cowboys, Stripes from Tacoma, the number one band from Yakima, anytime those guys would come up, we'd open for them.
That was the Shreds, right?
Yeah, the Shreds. That's it. And then your favorite band at the time, the Blue Baboons from Tacoma.
Shout out to Pat Boyle.
Shout out to Pat Boyle. Bingo long. Yeah, all those guys. That was like I made the decision in 84 that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to. My college music career was cruising along quite well, but once again, the weird pattern of having great male choir directors and then getting a female one, that had repeated itself now for the second time, 3 times total. And the woman was a drag. I mean, she was a drag. And I had to go through student teaching classes through her if I wanted to be a teacher. But things were going on so well at the ranch, it was like I said, screw this. And I ended up putting up my own degree. And so I went to this program called Individualized Studies and made up my own program. At the time, nobody had ever heard of it. But I took some business classes, some promotional classes, a couple of marketing classes, and made a music business thing, because I'd been spending all my time out at the ranch, and it was like there were flyers to be made, and you had to do contracts with bands and production and all this stuff, right? Music business. So I kind of left the music department at the end of 85, or at the end of 84. And that was the thing. That was it. So Boys Will Be Boys tried to move over to Seattle and subsequently fell apart because Joe and his wife were on the outs. Ken had his serious girlfriend, and he was going to get his life together, so he didn't have time for the band. Jay was pissed off because none of us had time for the band, and I started working at Tower and started immersing myself in the Seattle music scene. So we just kind of died, like bands do. You run out of gas because nothing seemed to be happening. But it was always fun. And to this day, you could put on Elvis Costello. Romeo was restless, he was ready to kill. That was one of our killer songs in The Clash. We always wanted to play Clamp Down. And it was a fun band. You
guys were a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
We glossed over, and we may get to more of it, but we glossed over just how much fun the ranch really was.
Well, the ranch is kind of its own story because, between 84 and 84, I started working there. So working at the ranch every weekend, I got during the week, outside of the normal classes and rehearsals, I would hang out at the little place. There's a little cabin behind the ranch called the Ranch House, and that's where Bob lived. So I would always be hanging out at the Ranch House and talking about music and listening to this and, hearing tapes from bands and talking about music and talking about songs and talking about dope. There was a lot of weed and a lot of cocaine flying through Ellensburg about that time.
So I'm trying to remember some of the more national acts that I saw at the ranch. And
J.J. Cale?
I never saw J.J. Cale.
J.J. Cale was there, he was there twice a year.
Which is regretfully now, I was sad because J.J. Cale was awesome.
And then, what's the other guy who was completely famous, but I didn't know who he was? Let's see. He's the guy who actually... I can't remember.
Well, Tom...
It starts with an E, but what I do remember is that this guy had this big hit, right? And he came through town, and his backup guitar player singer was a guy named Mickey Thomas. I think it's Mickey Thomas. But anyway, Mickey Thomas went on to sing the hit from that guy's band with Jefferson Starship.
That's what I was thinking. It was okay.
Yeah, I can't remember. It's kind of like a doc or a Dr. John type guy, but different. He played guitar and he was really swampy. Edwin, I wanted to say Edwin something, but I don't think that's right. I can't remember. It was cracking.
Huh.
And who else would come out there? The brothers.
Neville Brothers?
No, not the Neville Brothers, but right. It was like a Grateful Dead spinoff band.
Hot Tuna?
Hot Tuna have actually played the ranch. No, this was some kind of Big Brother and the Holding Company. That's who it was.
So without Janice, obviously.
Right. Big Brother and the Holding Company.
Interesting. Okay. Only the San Francisco sound.
Yeah, and there's countless others. I mean, we had semi-nationals coming through there because we were halfway between Seattle and Spokane.
Is that what the deal was? Is because I've always wondered about how did this barn in the middle of nowhere get?
Well, you got to remember, and when we say barn, you have to. The history of the ranch is actually it was built in the early to mid 30s, and was actually an airplane hangar. So it was about 300 to 400 feet long, and it was about 200 feet wide, and the sides were straight, but the top was rounded.
Mm-hmm.
And it had, at the time when we were there, it had the largest hand inlaid parquet dance floor on the West Coast. It was a place of, I mean, people have been playing music out there, dance hall stuff and all this other stuff for decades, since World War One, since the end of World War One and the Depression and everything. And the cool thing about it is that it sat on a street just across a street, which was the city limit. And so it wasn't susceptible to the city ordinances. It was part of Kittitas County, which used to kind of piss people off because the city had the college. See? And this is why all these acts would come there, because it was a college town and everything that went with it. The ranch had a capacity, a standing room only, within fire code, it was 500 people. That was the biggest place off campus that you could see a show. You could, that you could play in front of people. I've seen as many as 850 plus in that room.
Yeah, there were some nights I was in there where you couldn't move.
You couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't move. It got, in the wintertime, it would get so hot. There were so many people in there, the heat would rise to the ceiling, but it was wintertime, so it was cold outside, and it would cause condensation to form and then it would drip down. And I mean, it had 6 fans, but that didn't matter. That didn't matter.
So how long did you work at the ranch?
I worked at the ranch kind of fall. I started like fall of 83, all of 84, and 85 until I left. Okay. And not long after I left, Bob sold it. And I do believe it was because I didn't come over until 86. Yep, that's about right. Bob left it in 85 and I stopped working there. And it was New Year's Eve 85 going into 86 when the ranch burned down. Because the new owners really, tried to help them, but they were idiots. They didn't understand the dynamic of the town. They didn't want to listen to anybody. And so, I mean, Boys Will Be Boys, we tried to play out there a couple of times, but it just wasn't the same. The vibe wasn't there. And the bands that used to come out there, either they were breaking up or were having their own problems in their homeland. So, you're trying to get the second tier bands, and they weren't very good, or they weren't as good. Let's put it that way. They were still good. Bark in the Dark. I remember they came over. Anyway, so yeah, the new owners of the ranch weren't doing so well. So it was kind of interesting that New Year's Eve going into 86, yep, we had Boys Will Be Boys was playing at the Holiday Inn, and we had everybody. And 15 minutes before midnight, somebody came up to me on stage and they said, I just drove by the ranch. There's like 3 cars there. And this was New Year's Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Hungover that next morning, banging on my door, phone ringing. It had caught on fire overnight. Turns out that they had plugged three pinball machines and 1 space heater into 1 electric cord going into 1 outlet.
Okay.
Not realizing that this was a building that was built in the 30s, had sawdust insulation. It went up like a match.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that.
So in the years that you worked there, in the years that you went there, back and say, what was a memorable show that you saw there?
Wow. What's really strange is I don't remember any semi-nationals or national shows.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the show that will always stick out as the most amazing show I had ever seen, but there were 2 of them.
Okay.
One was the Heats. one of the last Heats gigs. And that was the picture I showed you last episode.
Mm-hmm.
The last time that Don Short, Steve Pearson, Wayne Clack, and Rick Burgoyne, it was like they were on the outs and we didn't know it at the time. But that was one of those nights when there was nobody. There was no room to get anywhere. And the picture is from, I think, right when they started. And even when they started, there was still probably 150, 200 people in there. And they played 3 sets. And by the end of the first set, there were no more parking spaces. By the end of the second set, there were no more sitting places. By the middle of the fourth set, we had run out of pitchers and we had to go scour everywhere just to keep, beer flowing and stuff because there were too many people and it was raining inside. It was amazing.
That band
was amazing.
Could always sell beer.
Always sell beer.
But I'm sure we'll talk about this, but
yeah, we'll talk about it.
One of my memories of that band is no matter where they played,
mm-hmm.
the beer was being sold. I mean, it was fascinating to watch.
Amazing.
It wasn't their persona at all, but if I were a bar owner,
yeah,
I know I'm going to make a killing that night. Forget the door. I don't care about the door. I just want the beer sales. I mean,
which is really weird because, the thing that's really different about live music back then is that, it wasn't tremendously expensive, but then again, nobody was making tremendous amounts of money except bar owners. Because back in the day, you had to have, almost everybody had beer and wine, and you had to have a special permit to have booze, and
mm-hmm.
almost no one had booze who had music. So you were going to taverns and clubs mm-hmm. that only had beer and wine if you wanted to see, like Waldo's in Kirkland. Remember when Waldo's didn't have they had a Class H? They couldn't get their Class H license.
Yes, I remember. And mm-hmm. I try not to think of Waldo's ever.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. It's like, the evolution.
We'll come to that.
We'll come to that when we get to the evolution of the diminishing thing of the Heats. But the Heats was one, and the second thing that I remember because I'm reminded of it so often was the Yanks.
Okay.
I did not know about the Yanks, right? Bob mm-hmm. was talking them up and talking them up and talking them up. Boy. Went to their sound check and I was a fan. Their drummer hit like a sledgehammer. Bass player was pretty solid, and the lead guitar player would just stand up. He'd stand over by his Marshall. He was playing a Fender Twin, and it sounded like 8 guitars. It was amazing. And then Owen, the singer, he was indescribable at that time, but I was just grooving on the drummer and the bass player because I played bass, right? Mm-hmm. And needless to say, I got to be good friends with the bass player, whose name is Steve Alamant. The big, after sound check, it's like we were doing our sound check. They did theirs first, and we set up and did ours, and got done, and Alamant was making jokes to the rest of the band about having me come up and play one of their songs that I'd never heard of before, called Saddle Up. And it's like, I felt really stupid because like 4 months after they had left, I actually sat down to figure that song out. And it's like kind of simple for a bass player. It's so fucking simple. But anyway, playing with the Yanks was dope, and I became a fan of theirs, and Bob became a fan of theirs, and we got both of their EPs, and I bought one twice, and he lost one, so I gave him one, and then he kept saying that he didn't have. I had his records. It was just weird. It's the only guy I've ever fought over having local, independent music. But that's why I have the Heats Burning Live. Thanks, Bob.
I have that Burning Live on the wall here, framed. Mm-hmm. I have the Yanks framed.
Which one?
I can't remember the name of it. It's the white one with the stripes on it.
Wait.
And then I have Rough Town.
Oh yeah,
framed.
Yeah. Only lovers left alive.
Yeah, no, those were, yeah. Anyway,
I'm in process of, if I weren't talking to you right now, I'm working on a remake of, because we liked them so much, we learned a whole bunch of their songs. And we learned Reason to Try.
Okay.
And so now I'm trying to do Reason to Try with a hip hop beat.
Interesting.
I played the demo to Element, and he sent it to Owen, and they both love it.
Great.
Yeah, except for I'm trying to do it all myself, and I'm having trouble learning the guitar part because I'm not a guitar player. I just know how to play guitar. So okay. I practice a lot. I spent all day Sunday. I spent most of the day Saturday and all day Saturday and most of the day Sunday, working on most of the morning Sunday, working on that, and I still haven't got it right.
Okay.
I had to give my fingers yesterday. Yeah, I had
a break.
Yeah, 2.5 hours, and my fingers were hurting. So I left and then came back and watched the football game. But Element is still living in Seattle. Well, he's back living in Seattle because that band was out of San Francisco, which was a whole different vibe. They were just a different kind of band. Really good though when you listen. I mean, the quality of the music and the songs is it's really strange how much like the Heats they were, but different. Right? I think the Heats had a little more depth because the Heats had the Cowboys, and the Cowboys the Cowboys in Seattle. Cowboys really, really embraced the Clash, and they got really, really inspired by reggae music. So a lot of their music had a lot of reggae undertones. Whereas,
but before we go there, a little bit, I'm going to pump the brakes before we leave Ellensburg. What other venues did we go to in Ellensburg besides? Because it wasn't just the Ranch.
No,
I mean,
the Ranch,
Holiday Inn.
The Ranch and the Holiday Inn were the biggest places in town and the hardest places to book because you had to bring people. And for Boys Will Be Boys, it wasn't that we couldn't bring people. We just couldn't count on people. Because if we had a headlining gig, it's like we'd be lucky to get 50 people out there. But if we were opening for somebody, there'd be 80 people there before we started. And, by the time we got done with our 2 sets, the place was half full. Never could understand that. But if you weren't playing at the Holiday or the Ranch, you could fit into the place across the street from the Shoe, better known as the Mint. It's gone by many names, but I always remember it as the Mint. And then down the street in the corner from the Horseshoe, on the corner, there used to be, is it Third and Water? Yeah, Third and Water. There used to be a Japanese restaurant there called the Pagoda.
The Pagoda.
The Pagoda was great. Boys Will Be Boys. We played there once. Had so many people in there. The owner dragged me downstairs while there was, and this was this was during a break. There were so many people in there. He showed me the big truss, the big center beam truss that was going across the bar floor. And there were so many people in there dancing, you could see it flexing. Good.
Wow.
2, 3, sometimes 5 inches.
So what was the name of the bar that had the circular staircase?
Adeline's. I was getting to that.
Okay.
Yeah. Adeline's was an upstairs bar, but it was small. So you could do like a 3-piece in there.
Right.
Keith Wolford's little blues band, the band that used to give me nightmares because these are guys who had been playing since probably the early 70s. And, they've been playing all this boogie woogie bluesy stuff, right? But it's like they got old in the tooth. And so all the older people in the townies went to see their group. But they were annoyingly horrible. But if if nobody else was playing, you could go see them and 4 or 5 whiskey shots and it didn't matter. Pitcher and a half, and it's like, who cares what it sounds like? Where are the girls? Give me the. Let's play pool. But see, Adelines, and Adelines was the place that boys will be boys with. We rehearsed in the only music store in town, and we got out of rehearsal one night, and it was like there was all this commotion downtown, and we didn't know why. Sirens everywhere. We saw lights walk around the corner, and the building directly across the street from Adelines was on fire. I mean, fully engulfed, 3-story building on fire. Streets blocked off, and I remember we were sitting. I was drinking snake bites at that time, just watching the street burn. And to this very day, they've never put a building in it. And when you drive down Water Street and you get between 3rd and 4th, you'll see this empty space on the east side of the street. And they got this nice little fence there now, but that used to be a building. Addie's was great. Bob and the owner of Addie's were really, really good friends. So a lot of times we get done doing whatever we were doing at the ranch and then go up the back stairs to Adeline's and drink there until like 6 a.m. 6 a.m. would come, and then we'd go to the Highway Grill and have Bloody Marys and breakfast, and then go home and go to bed.
Right.
It was punishing.
Ellensburg was an
acquired.
So the thing about Ellensburg for me, when I think about all the hijinks and craziness that went on, is nobody got hurt. No. It was like we were in this bubble, and we were somehow, somebody should have gotten hurt.
Well, the thing of it is that we weren't crazy. We weren't overly crazy. There were some overly crazy people, and they got arrested. But I mean, it's not like, it's so different from today. Number one, because it's a small town, so you really didn't have to drive. No. Ellensburg was so small, you could be down at the freeway where the McDonald's and stuff is, and you could walk all the way to the other side of campus in less than 2 hours walking. Mm-hmm. Right? So, I remember traversing the whole damn, coming from upper campus all the way down to the Holiday Inn on my bicycle.
Yeah, when I worked there, I used to ride a bike or walk to the Holiday Inn.
Yes, a lot. Mm-hmm. And so, hey, you did what you did, but it was a simpler time, and a lot more was allowed, and a lot more was allowed because there wasn't a lot of serious hijinks going on. These days, people take unnecessary chances and really don't. They tend not to be accountable for their actions. Right. Back then, the consideration was you didn't want to go too far because this person that, and you didn't want to mess up somebody's yard, or you didn't want to break any furniture, you didn't want to run into somebody's car. These days, everybody's so centric. It's like, I don't give a shit as long as I get what I want. I could care less about you.
Right. So one thing that we overlooked, that'll tie some of this together in my mind. So you were in the music program.
Yep.
And Central had a pretty good jazz band.
Pretty good. Boy, are you spoiled.
Yeah, no. Central had an amazing jazz program.
Yeah, when I started there in 79, they were one of the top 5 jazz programs, college jazz programs in the country.
Yeah, no.
Our biggest competition was North Texas State.
Okay, which, when I think of jazz, I think of Texas. Okay.
Yeah.
But
right? North Texas.
But there was this thing called Jazz Night.
Jazz Night. So can I
go right ahead.
So, college was on a quarter system. We were on a quarter system and not a semester system. So you start at the beginning of fall quarter and you're learning this music not only to get to Christmas, but at the end of the quarter, you'd have a jazz performance. You'd have Jazz Night, and it was the final performance of the quarter. So every quarter we were, there was 1, 2, 3 jazz bands, 1, 2 jazz choirs, all learning music, right? And all 5 groups would perform for jazz night. And in the springtime, it was worse. Why? Because they had a festival, high school festival. So it'd be an all-day affair. And at the night concert, right, the first jazz band, the first jazz choir would perform, and they would have a special guest. And this is the part where you and I were extremely lucky. Some of the names, 2 of the names that I got to perform with were Joe Williams, Dizzy Gillespie.
Yep.
Performed at our school.
I know.
Right?
That was crazy.
Yeah. That's
big
crazy.
names. Big names.
Yeah. Yeah. I was playing percussion in the jazz band when Dizzy was up there and got to do Night in Tunisia which he wrote. It's his signature tune. And I was playing congas and other percussion and stuff. And I'll never forget it. I'm trying to trade 4s with Dizzy Gillespie. And so he goes first, then I go, then he goes again, and then I go. And he looks at me and he just goes, so 4 turned into 8. 8 turned into 12. 12 turned into 16. And then he come in and you play 4. And then it's like the whole thing would go over again. And here I am, I'm trying to play stuff. And then we went back into it was legendary. It was legendary. And, I went to Central. One of the main reasons I went to Central was because they put a mountain range between my parents and I. Because I really wanted to break out and be independent and get away from home, get away from it all.
But not too far.
I wanted to get away from it all. But luckily, I was smart enough not to go too far. Because, man, I don't think I could have cut it at Yakima Valley or Columbia Basin or God forbid, Eastern.
What about WSU?
Oh, God. No way. Couldn't get me. No. Mm-hmm. But anyway, my parents were in the audience and got to see that. It was one of the proudest days of my life. My parents came over to see me play with Dizzy Gillespie. And that was one of 3 times that they ever came over.
Okay.
While I was there. Because, they just didn't come. But Jazz Night was special. Jazz Night was always special. It was always special. And what was really cool is, the music community there at that time was like an extended family, brothers and sisters, cousin type thing. Everybody hung out together, even though, there was a little bit of a war between the orchestra playing their classical music and the jazz people playing jazz music.
Right.
But if you were in the concert band, odds were that you played in a jazz band or combo or jammed, at what was called VAT night, where they'd have combos at this one bar downtown, the Tav.
The Tav,
which is still there, by the way. And if you're ever in Ellensburg, just off the corner of 4th and Water is the Tav. You walk in, you get yourself a beverage and say, "I'd like a super mother, please."
Yes. But after Jazz Night, it was always the Jazz Night party.
I don't remember ours.
Well,
I don't remember ours at all. I don't remember ours.
So we hosted a Jazz Night party
at the infamous 4th and Anderson house.
We did it once. Without going into too many details, because
we don't remember, for one.
We don't remember them, and there were no cell phones recording them.
Thank God. Thank God.
I don't know. So our house was so we had 2 living room spaces.
Mm-hmm.
We had a bedroom up the front. That was mine.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so you walked in the front door and there was a living room. And then my bedroom was off to the left. And then you kept walking forward into the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And if you went straight through the kitchen, you went to the back bedroom, which was Todd's.
Mm-hmm.
Off to the left in the kitchen was like a covered sunroom that you stepped down into. And then the bathroom was off the kitchen as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then downstairs was the basement. And upstairs was where some of the basketball team lived.
Yep.
They weren't, we don't know who they were. They were always there at weird hours, and
Wait.
where they were dribbling.
Where's my room?
You were in the basement.
That's right.
You converted part of the basement into your lair,
Sleeping quarters.
Yeah. So
It was perfect.
I don't know how many people were in our house, but it rivaled the ranch's busiest nights. I mean, you could not move.
Oh, what? When we had parties?
No, at the jazz night party.
Easily 80 people in
and we went through
80, probably 80 people in, I would say conservatively, I would say it's like maybe 2,200, 2,800 square feet.
Oh, it wasn't that big.
I was including the basement.
Oh, including the basement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Maybe about 2,000 square feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not exactly huge.
No. And one bathroom. Might I add for visual effects, one bathroom.
Yeah. That wasn't fun.
And we went through 10 kegs of beer.
Yep. Party went on for a long time. Concert got over at 11. The party ended like 10 a.m. the next day, maybe.
Yeah,
It went for a while, and we went with it.
No,
it was long.
It went on without us.
It went on. Let's just say it just went on.
Yeah. So I think we can leave Ellensburg now. Can we close the Ellensburg chapter?
We have to close the Ellensburg chapter with the spring of '86.
Okay.
And that's where I lived behind Gerald's and you lived down the street. And I forgot.
That's right.
I can't remember who you were dating at that time. She was gorgeous though. Anyway, you had a girlfriend, and it was like, I wanted a girlfriend. I didn't have a girlfriend. Oh, yes, I did. Her name was Karen, and she was blonde, and she was beautiful.
I don't remember.
Karen Streeter?
No, who I was dating.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, well. Yeah, it got to the point. Something happened. I think by the end of by the end of winter quarter. Nope, by the end of spring quarter, you couldn't stay, and you had to leave. And I had been trying to get work there since March, and I couldn't find a job that was going to make me enough money. And so it came to the end of July, and I gave my notice, and that's when I moved out.
Yeah, I'd taken a job over in Seattle.
Yeah, what was your first job in Seattle?
I worked for a mortgage company, and I lasted exactly 89 days.
Got me beat. Well, but not really.
This isn't about me.
Yeah, well, I was just trying to compare because, that's a respectable job working, for a financial institution. I tried to get I tried to get a job at Safeco Insurance. I lasted 9 days.
Okay.
I don't want to say it was a black thing, but it was a black thing. Because I never got a reason. They couldn't tell me because if they gave me a reason, then they were afraid I was going to sue them. So, anyway.
Yeah, my company had a 90-day, probation period.
Oh, nasty. So on the day before freedom.
Well, it's because we had a company party.
Oops.
And the owner of the company, this was my first time at the company party. And we played touch football.
Oh, God.
And the owner of the company didn't lose.
Oh, you didn't?
I did. Didn't know that he didn't lose. So not only did we win, we ran it up. Because back then I was somewhat athletic. And
yeah.
And I could throw the ball a long, long ways.
About that, there was this little thing called office politics that I think that you had your first exposure to.
But nobody told me. See, that's the whole thing. Nobody told me.
Nope.
And then I went into work the next week and they didn't need me anymore. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but that's enough about that.
Yeah. And, I came over and lived in my brother's basement, and within 2 weeks had my first job in Seattle, which was working as a clerk at Tower Records in the U District.
Mm-hmm.
And we could pick it up from there.
We will. So thank you for being here again for this episode.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we're gonna have to, now we're gonna have to start actually branching out to these other places that we've gone to see music.
Yes. But I really want to talk about, because you've been interviewed a lot and we've known each other a long, long time. And all these stories that we're telling, we've heard before from each other, which is perfectly fun. But I don't know that in your other,
what story I was nice enough to leave out?
Well, I've got some too. So is this going to be mutual self-destruction?
Huey Lewis.
Yeah, Huey Lewis. Or I'm the one person in the world. I am the one person in the world that can introduce you as the man who taught me how to cook bacon.
It's true.
And then I will close this episode. I will take the final word.
Uh-oh.
Ain't it great?
The best
for that, folks. We'll see you next week.
The best story of that house.
Join us next time for another episode of the Exploring Washington State podcast.